Shareholders of Credit Suisse vent their fury as the chairman says he's truly sorry for taking the bank to the brink of bankruptcy. And the space dream comes back down to earth. Richard Branson's Virgin Orbit files for bankruptcy. Hello, welcome along. This is World Business Report. I'm Ben Thompson. Now we're going to start with that news that shareholders have been venting their anger at Credit Suisse's final AGM in Zurich today. The chairman of the bank has said he is truly sorry for taking the company to the brink of bankruptcy. Credit Suisse, you may know, was taken over last month by its rival UBS in an emergency deal that was backed by the Swiss government. Shareholders were not consulted about that takeover. So let's head straight to Switzerland and speak to our correspondent there, Imogen Folks. And Imogen, it's interesting if you read some of what's come out of this meeting. As we said, the boss there apologising and also said that actually a collapse entirely would have been bad news for the country and therefore this was the least bad option.
Well, that's right. It's a blustery day, as you can see here in Switzerland, but there's a tornado of anger blowing through Credit Suisse's annual general meeting. It's true, the top managers, the CEO, the chairman of the board have been publicly eating humble pie. They've said sorry on multiple occasions. They've said it was, as you said, the least bad option. It was this or bankruptcy, and that would have led to a financial crisis, not just here in Switzerland, but right around the world. But the shareholders, one after the other, have been standing up and saying, this is really, really bad. We weren't consulted. We've lost money. One of them got up, very dapper looking gentleman wearing a red tie. He said, I'm wearing this red tie because you lot, and he pointed to the management, all deserve a red card. Another one got up and said, you know, he aimed his criticism at the Swiss government for forcing through this deal. He said, some of us take longer to choose our smartphones than our government took to basically get rid of a 167-year-old bank, which is part of Swiss history.
Yes, and that sort of fills the issue, doesn't it? Switzerland prides itself on being a safe haven, law and order, calmness on financial markets, and this proved that it was anything but. There was something coming out of the blue for shareholders that they didn't like in a country that's known for voting on everything.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They expected to have a vote. They will not get it. They're going to have to accept their Credit Suisse shares, currently valued at, I think, 10% of what they were valued at just a few months ago. Maybe they'll be converted into UBS shares and maybe they will be good. That could help. But I think one of the problems also is this is not the first time. We had UBS back in the financial crisis, 2009, having to have a massive bailout from the Swiss government. Now we have the other big Swiss historic bank, Credit Suisse, basically going under. Now, if you're a middle-class Swiss person, particularly the older generation, you invest some of your money for your old age in stocks. What are the ones you think are safe? The big Swiss banks. So there are a lot of normally very quiet, very calm people, very angry in Zurich today. And I think it really, again, it's another knock to that Swiss image of responsibility, probity, careful with money, because for Credit Suisse to end up like this, they clearly haven't been.
Yeah, absolutely. Imogen, it's really good to talk to you and thanks for following that AGM for us. It looks beautiful there, doesn't it, in Switzerland. Now to something entirely different, because Richard Branson's Virgin Orbit, it has filed for bankruptcy. The satellite launch company failed to secure a long-term funding deal that was needed to help it recover from a January rocket failure. Well, last Thursday, the company, which is based in California, sacked 85% of its staff, leaving just 100 employees to run what was left of the company. So let's speak now to the space writer Nick Spall, who's a fellow at the Royal Astronomical Society. Thank you for being with us. Just talk to me first of all about what went wrong.
Well, the if you like, the technical issues are that they had a launch failure back in January. They were trying to launch a horizontal launch rocket launcher out of UK soil. Unfortunately, that rocket satellite group didn't get into orbit. There was a technical failure, a fuel filter. But previous to that, they'd had 4 successful launches. So the company is doing okay. Satellite launching is very hard in its early stages for companies. So it's not surprising they've run into the odd technical glitch. What is obviously disappointing is they can't secure the funding to carry on in their present form. And obviously, they'll need a new buyer to take it on.
Yes, we know it is notoriously expensive to do this sort of stuff, and I guess a lot of failure is built into how these things work. You've got to try and fail until you find the right thing. Talk to me, though, about whether this is the end of the road. Do we expect that it will live on in a different shape or form?
I think it will live on. I think there will be a buyer out there. The demand for small satellites, we're talking about sort of satellites up to, say, 50 kilograms in size, is really increasing. It's really accelerating. And you've probably seen that OneWeb, which Britain has a stake in, this is a constellation of internet small satellites, hundreds, over 400 been lofted so far for OneWeb, and also Starlink. Again, small satellites that are going up from SpaceX to provide internet. That is a classic example of they had the odd launch failure, but now they're almost there. And it really requires a lot of patience and a lot of investor confidence in the future. So the demand is there. There's plenty of demand. One customer actually for the Virgin Orbit rocket launcher was the MOD. They were keen to have UK military small satellites going up from UK soil. And also, of course, sticking to the UK, we're going to see 2 vertical launch spaceports coming up, one in Sutherland later this year and then one in next year in the Orkneys. So it's Shetlands, sorry. And so the market is there, the if you like, private investor support is there, and it's up to Virgin to, if you like, sell themselves and find a new buyer for this very innovative system.
Yeah, watch this space. They'll probably have to have deep pockets, won't they? Nick, good to talk to you. Thanks so much. Nick Spall there, Fellow at the Royal Astronomical Society. Now, let's turn our attention to India, where the population is currently at 1.4 billion. So imagine the challenge of running government welfare programmes there when many people live in remote rural areas. So there is now a new app that could tackle that challenge. And as our India business correspondent Nikhil Inamdar reports, it's now working across the country.
Consider this. The Indian government spends about 7% of its GDP on welfare and benefits. There are about 13,000 odd schemes that 900 million Indians can avail of. Everything from scholarships to pensions to healthcare. But very often the problem is people simply do not have the information about what they're eligible for.
So this is the Haq Darshak.
Haq Darshak, a startup co-founded by Aniket Dogar, is using technology to connect beneficiaries with government welfare programs. So how does it work?
You essentially start by registering the citizen on the platform by asking basic demographic details and their name, phone number, gender, where they live. These set of 40 to 50 questions ultimately lead to an icon saying what are your eligible government schemes. And these are the documents, identity documents required to get these schemes.
Gangubai Vasavla is one of the 3 million people across some 7,000 villages who've claimed their benefits using Haq Darshak. The company helped her get a grant for 20 mango saplings under the government's fruit tree plantation scheme for farmers.
I got $25 to buy the plants and now get government help to keep them alive. When they're ready, it will help me supplement my family's income.
Now, while the Haq Darshak app might look easy to use for people like you and me, most of its beneficiaries are neither literate nor are they tech savvy. And that's where the company's army of ground agents comes into the picture.
Every day, Manisha, a Haq Darshak field agent, screens people for scheme eligibility, uploads their documents on the app and submits them to the relevant government department for processing.
In this village, barely 100 people had a pension. But since I began doing this, I've helped 5,000 of the 15,000 villagers claim it. I feel very proud.
But Haq Darshak charges a minimum fee for its services, barely enough to cover costs. Can they ever make money from this?
We are creating that base for financial institutions, financial service organizations, where they can build on top of it. and offer products. So there we see in the next 4 to 5 years, we really being able to, let's say, monetize and get profitable.
Aniket's aim in the next few years is to help 100 million Indians claim what's rightfully theirs. It's a lofty goal, especially since funding for startups has dried up and getting corporates to pay for welfare is getting tougher in a slowing economy. Nikhil Anandar, BBC News in Palghar, India.
Also today, US and EU officials are meeting to discuss energy cooperation. The focus, well, according to the US, is joint efforts to blunt Russia's attempts to weaponize energy and bolster energy supplies for the winter. Well, this comes as EU member states consider extending restrictions or even outright bans on Russian natural gas imports. Well, Olga Hakova is a deputy director at the European Energy Security at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Centre.
So there are several near-term priorities, of course, continuing diversification of natural gas supplies, continuing exports, LNG exports from US, but also securing these exports from other countries. But that's just one area where we can work together. Looking into broader areas of cooperation on energy efficiency, there are workforce labor issues, constraints, supply chain constraints. Actually, as we talk about buildings being retrofitted, as we talk about heat pumps being installed, that is an area where we can work together. U.S. has really fantastic resources in its national labs. So being able to exchange best practices of what works and what doesn't, that's a huge, massive area where we can work together. Critical minerals, we cannot secure a clean energy transition without robust supply chains when it comes to critical minerals. And that is an area that's not something that U.S. will be able to solve on its own and not something that Europe can do on its own. That's another place where we can work together. And of course, it's this intricate balance of what needs to be done, what's immediate measures this year with longer term priorities, because we're still in a supply crunch and that's not something that's going to be resolved this year. These are long-term contracts and other investments that will need to be made over the next decade in order to ensure that we have a secure, clean energy future without Russia.
Let's bring you up to date with some of today's other business stories. The former UK Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson has died at the age of 91. He held several cabinet posts under Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s and was seen as one of the most consequential of all post-war UK chancellors. He's credited with creating powerful entrepreneurial forces, but will also be remembered around the UK as widening inequality. And a federal jury in San Francisco has ordered Tesla to pay around $3.2 million to black former employee. The electric vehicle maker was found to have failed to prevent severe racial harassment. Those are your business headlines. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.